I think in investing, you're going to be wrong a number of times, but you've still got to take the risks. The more issues there are in the economy or the more issues there are with people, that's beneficial for what we try to do. So I just focus on things I can control, not things I can't.
Mark Lazary is a champion in both investing and basketball.
When you're investing, you can control a lot more things. On a basketball court, you can't control whether somebody's going to make a shot. You've got to get lucky.
Lazary, a trained lawyer, is considered a pioneer in distressed investing.
I'm pretty simplistic about these things. I'm like, look, here's what the law is. Here's what we can do. Let's try to cut a deal that's fair.
He started his firm, Avenue, with his sister Soonia Gardner in 1995 with less than $10 million in capital. Today, the firm manages $12 billion in assets.
She is focused on making sure the firm runs well. I end up getting to do the investment side, which is what I love.
His love of basketball led to one of his greatest deals. In 2014, Lazary and a group of investors purchased the Milwaukee Bucks for $550 million. Today, the team is valued at $1.9 billion, and last year took home the championship.
So is there more pressure when you're trying to win a basketball championship than when you're trying to please investors? Where's the greater pressure?
Oh, I think it's definitely trying to win a championship. It's hard because a lot of, like when you invest, and you know this, when you're investing, you can control a lot more things. When, you know, on a basketball court, you can't control whether somebody's going to make a shot. You've got to get lucky. You've got to be really, really good, but you also have to be really lucky.
And what's the greater pleasure, making 5 times your money on a distressed debt investment or winning the NBA championship?
They're both fabulous. I wish I could do one each year. That would be great. But I think there's a great feeling in being right on an investment, that you've done a tremendous amount of work and you've made money for your clients, which I think is great. I think winning a championship it's a very surreal feeling because there's a whole city or state that is actually behind you. You know, we had 70,000 people at the finals, and we had them all outside. You had 17,000 in the stands, and then literally like 60,000 people outside. And when we won, like just the joy that you had brought to the city was phenomenal.
Let me ask you about distressed debt for a moment before we get back to basketball. Distressed debt implies that there's some company under stress usually, but for the last couple of years there hasn't been that much distress. So what have distressed debt investors been doing with themselves other than buying basketball teams?
There hasn't been, you're absolutely correct. So what we've done is gone into the private lending business. So I think investors want to try to make anywhere between 10 to 15%. And so our business has dramatically shifted over the course of the last 3 to 5 years to now we just lend money. And we're lending money anywhere between 8 to 12% at a senior secured level. And then you'll do a half a turn of leverage. So it actually it's actually worked out really well.
And do you expect, because interest rates are going up and inflation is up and the economy may be slowing down a bit, that there is going to be more distressed debt in the next 1 or 2 or 3 years than you've seen the last 1 or 2 or 3 years?
Absolutely. I mean, with rates rising, that's actually good for us because the more issues there are in the economy or the more issues there are with people, that's beneficial for what we try to do.
So let's talk about your background a moment. You were born in Marrakesh?
Yes.
So your parents decided to move to the United States, and you're young, and when you came over here, did you speak English at all or nothing?
No, not at all. I was actually, I went to a public school in Hartford, and because I had dark hair, I was with all the kids who were Hispanic. They thought I was Hispanic, so they were speaking in Spanish, and I was trying to learn English, so I was all confused.
All right, so you were a high school basketball player?
The legend is that I was, yes.
Okay. But I thought you went to Clark University and played basketball there as well.
I did, but Clark was Division III, so I played, and by my sophomore year, I realized I wasn't that good. So I then played in the club, the club teams, and I did really well there.
Okay, so, well, you weren't able to dunk the ball, I assume, now.
I could dunk a volleyball.
Really?
Well, my hand wasn't big enough for a basketball. I could jump.
My theory's always been that if James Naismith was Jewish, he would have made the hoop a little bit lower.
Probably.
Right. All right, you graduate from Clark, and then you go to New York Law School?
Yes, sir.
And then you started practicing law?
So I clerked for the chief bankruptcy judge. And then because I did that, I'd done well in law school. So because of that, I ended up getting offers in bankruptcy, right? I thought I was going to be a tax lawyer. I was always good with numbers, but since I clerked for a judge, and I got all these offers to do bankruptcy law, so I did that.
Okay.
And I practiced for about, it was a long time. It was about a year. That was enough for me.
All right. Well, I practiced 2 years. That was...
Okay, so there you go.
Yeah, twice as long. So, all right, so then what happens is you decide to get in the investment business. And how did you segue from practicing law after 1 year into the investment business?
So I went to work at a firm, that was an investment firm, small firm. And at the end of the year, I was making $50,000. And at the end of the year, I had shifted over to the investment side. And I had made the firm $25 million. So this is in '86. And you're all excited, you're going to get a bonus. And I call my dad, and I'm trying to figure out, what do I ask? So my father says, well, don't be greedy, ask for half of 1%. So I asked for $125,000. And I thought, that would be great. And I had a child at the time. And the person who's giving me the bonus goes, well, how much do you want? I said, $125,000, I think would be fair. And he goes, no, we're not going to do that. I was like, oh, okay, how much? And I don't know if you've ever had this in your career. Somebody stands up, they put their arm around you. It's called an attaboy. You're doing really well. He goes, we're going to give you $10,000. I was like, okay, thank you. And then I left 3 months later, and I went to work at Cowan and Company.
Okay, so how did you raise your initial capital, though, to start investing?
So I went to Cowan, and Cowan, the partnership at Cowan gave me $25 million. We did about 60% a year for about 2 years. And somehow I got on the radar of the Bass family and somebody who you know, David Bonnerman. And they asked me to come over and run money for the Bass family. And then in 1990, I left and went, I was 30, so I was old. And I left to go off on my own, and I started investing my money. I had made with the Bass family about $10 million. Okay. So I gave my wife half and said, never give me this.
So you started the firm with your sister.
Yes.
And it's very unusual to see brother-sister financial partnerships, I guess. I don't see that many of them. So what's it like working with your sister?
It's actually great. It's I think you can only work with a sibling if you're really different. I think when you're similar, it's very hard because you want to do the same things. I think when you're different, she manages the firm. She's general counsel. She is focused on making sure the firm runs well. I end up getting to do the investment side, which is what I love. And the marketing side. So the things I love, she doesn't, and things she loves, I don't.
And you have another sister in the business?
Yeah, we have one more sister who out of the three of us is probably the smartest one, but she joined 10 years later. Oh. So.
Do you have any more sisters in her company?
No, that's it. I just had two sisters.
And so you seem like you're a fairly laid-back guy. You're dressed very casually and so forth. But I always thought distressed debt investors are very nervous people. They're pounding on the table. You don't have that characteristic, or you'd have somebody else do that for you?
No. I think people are usually pretty smart, so I like to explain what the situation is. And I think when we talk to people, we'll say, look, here's what you can do, here's what I can do. There's a 90% probability I'll win, but there's still 10, so I'm willing to settle. I just sort of try to go through all the facts with everybody. I think other people, I've had folks, where they'll come in my office and say, if you don't agree to this, we're going to out of you. We're going to make your life utterly miserable. And you'll go, okay, all right, good luck. I guess we're going down that road. I mean, I don't take it personal. I think I know what will end up happening, or I assume I know, and there's a probability of that. So I just focus on things I can control, not things I can't.
So have you ever made a distressed debt investment, didn't work out, you actually lost money? Does that ever happen?
Yeah, it's horrible. Yes.
So what do you conclude was the mistake you made? You're just too optimistic about something?
Well, I think that the business itself changed. We thought we were covered on the debt side. And then what normally ends up happening is the company needed more cash, so we let the company borrow against that because we didn't want to liquidate the company, and just, we were wrong. And I think in investing, you're going to be wrong a number of times, but you've still got to take the risk, so that's fine.
So when you lose money, it's pretty depressing. You just go on to the nenext thing, or do you think about it for the next 30 years as I do whenever I do something else?
I don't think about it for 30 years. I'll focus. It's probably after a couple days, I'm over it. it's.
What about your best deal ever? Without mentioning the name of it, perhaps you don't want to embarrass anybody by saying how profitable your deal was compared to what they did, but what was your best deal? Was it make 5 times your money, 10 times your money, something like that?
I think our best deal for us was something where we made 30 times our money, where we had bought the bonds at 2 to 3 cents, and the bonds ended up becoming worth par. So that was great.
You have any more like that?
I'm looking for them, trust me. I have a pretty good relationship with a lot of the players, so I'll just go in and say, look, you stop worrying about it, just shoot. It'll go in. If it doesn't, it's not the end of the world. We'll lose and we'll all go home.
Billionaire investors lured to the NBA owner's box are now reaping the rewards of their financial bet. Mark Lazary and Wes Edens purchased the Milwaukee Bucks for $550 million in 2014. Now the team's value has more than tripled to nearly $2 billion. And other deep-pocketed investors have seen similar appreciation. In 2021, the value of the average NBA franchise rose 9% from a year earlier to $2.5 billion. And while winning drove value for Lazary's Bucks, it's not required. The Knicks have won only one playoff series since 2000, and yet they remain the NBA's most valuable team, worth $6.1 billion.
So you're managing your company, your family's money, you've got 2 sisters, everything is going well. Why did you want to buy a basketball team?
I wanted to buy a basketball team at the time because I had played. I loved it. I thought it was fun. I was about 52 years old. We wanted to try to do something with the family because my kids all played basketball. So the Milwaukee Bucks came up. That was the good news. The bad news is they were in Milwaukee. So it was a bit far to go, but they were the only team, and so we got involved, and we were able to buy it.
Were you bidding against other people?
We were. We actually were. I think we were $100 million over. Somehow, you hate when you find out that you
were prepared to pay $100 million more than the next bidder?
No. We found out that the next bidder was at $450, and we were at $550.
Oh.
And
so did you lower yours to $451, or?
I wanted to, but they said they wouldn't accept it. I was like, I don't understand. We're $100 million over. How about $500 million? They were like, no, it's $550 or you don't have it.
So what did you do?
I caved. I shouldn't have, but I did. And
but the team is now worth over $2 billion or something?
Yes.
So it's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, it's so the part that's actually shocking, when we bought the team, it was making $5 million, so we paid 100 times. So today, you invest. If I said to you, hey, 7 years later, the team's going to be losing $5 million, what do you think it's worth? You wouldn't have said $2.5 billion.
So when Steve Ballmer came along and paid $2 billion for the LA Clippers, I guess everybody in the league was happy, right?
Oh, I was thrilled, yes. I thought it was the greatest thing. I was like, yes, good trade.
So when the team is not doing that well, would you ever go in and give a win one for the Gipper speech at halftime? Do you ever go in and kind of tell them win one for the owner?
No, that I don't do, but I will go in. I have a pretty good relationship with a lot of the players, so I'll just go in and say, look, you stop worrying about it, just shoot. it'll go in. If it doesn't, it's not the end of the world. We'll lose and we'll all go home. But it's just more cheering people up.
So one of your best investments has obviously been the basketball team.
Yes.
Are you thinking of buying any more sports teams, or?
No, they're expensive now.
Right.
They're very expensive.
Now, recently I think I read that you invested in a sports betting app.
Yes, Wokrة.
Now, tell me why you're involved in that, and how much can owners of NBA teams invest in sports betting things?
Yeah, no, you can. You can invest in a lot of things that the NBA is involved in. You just can't control it. So you can be an investor. So I invested in that. I actually bought another franchise. I bought a pickleball franchise. So have you ever played pickleball?
I've heard of it, but I haven't played it yet. But I
like
didn't know there was a franchise you got. I thought it was a sport you just played. But you
played. So
teams?
They just started a franchise. And they just started a league, pickleball league. It's like the fastest growing sport, and I play it all the time just because it's easier to play. But then a friend of mine, James Blake, said we could buy a team, so I bought it with him.
Wow. So that was less than $550 million, I assume.
Yeah, it was less. Yeah, it was less than $1 million. You're gonna make mistakes. Understand that. Make your mistakes, because the only way you will ever make money is by taking risks.
You're an expert in debt investing.
Yes, sir.
And you like distressed debt investing.
Yep.
The U.S. government has like $30 trillion of debt
Yes.
that some people might say sort of distressed. Are you worried about the U.S. government's ability with higher interest rates to pay off this debt without deflating the value of our dollar?
Yes, I actually am. I think that's going to be an issue. I don't think anybody's going to focus on it. They'll start focusing on it in 3 to 4 years. I mean, as rates move up because of the debt that we have, the cost of servicing that debt is so expensive. It's going to be an issue, but for whatever reason, people don't want to focus on it.
But do you buy government securities or debt around the world? Do you buy debt in other countries?
No, we don't. It's got to be a company, because we've got to be able to do the work. I think when you're buying government securities, that's a macro call.
But the general economy itself, now as we talk, there's a war in Ukraine. Is that affecting the economy in your view? And are you worried about the economy and a potential recession?
I think it's obviously creating issues. I think as oil prices move up, the cost of that for the consumer becomes higher and higher, obviously, and that'll create, I think you could have a recession. I think right now we're probably growing at 1 or 2%. But if things slow down, I mean, the Fed is raising rates, oil's going up, we'll see where things are in 3 to 6 months. But you could be in a recession. I mean, a recession is 2 down quarters, so it wouldn't be till next year. But I think things are definitely slowing down.
So do people in government, there's a Democratic administration now, you're well known to a lot of Democratic figures. Do they call you for advice, or do you go down there and tell them what to do, or how does that work?
Yeah, they'll call. I go down there. And the great thing is they don't listen. So it's actually, I don't know if you've ever found that, but you give your advice and people go, oh, thank you, and then you leave.
What about members of Congress? Do you talk to them very much about what's going on?
I'll talk to some. I will, but I think part of it is, I think there's a view that you've got to keep on spending, right, and that you need to do that. And I don't know if I disagree with it, but it's going to create a lot of issues.
Let me ask you this. Sometimes I have friends in the distressed debt business like you, and they don't like to say this to me, but let's suppose my firm does a buyout. And they actually don't want to tell me, but they think it's not such a good buyout, and they start buying my debt at a distress. Do you tell your friends in the buyout world, guess what, I think your debt isn't going to be so great, and I'm buying it now at distress because I think you're going to go bankrupt? You ever tell your friends that?
All the time.
And what do they tell you?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say, look, you own the equity, I own the debt, so I think I'm senior. Your debt's trading at 60 cents, so theoretically your equity is worthless. And they say to me, no, actually, you don't understand what we're doing. We're going to turn around. I'm like, so why don't you buy the debt? I go, are you kidding me? If I'm right, I wouldn't want to go from 60 to par. I've got the equity. That equity is going to be worth 5, 10 times. You know, everybody, I think as a credit investor, I'm very happy making 2 times my money or 1.5 times.
Let's suppose I say, I don't really know much about the investment world. I want to double my money over the next couple of years. Would I be better off to go into a buyout firm or a distressed debt fund?
A buyout firm. I would. I mean, I think because I'm going to be limited. My average cost is usually 60 to 75 cents, right? And for it to work out, it's 2 to 3 years. A buyout, when you're right, you'll make 2, 3, 4, or 5 times your money because of the leverage.
Okay. So what is the best investment advice you've ever received?
I think part of it was from David Bonnerman. It was like, when you make a mistake, just move on. Don't learn from your mistake. Don't focus on like all the things you did wrong. You're gonna make mistakes. Understand that, make your mistakes, because the only way you will ever make money is by taking risks. And I think in the beginning I was a lot more conservative, and I've become a little bit less conservative because of that.
I wish I'd had that advice. I focus on my mistakes for about 30 years, then I get over them. But what do you think is the biggest mistake that the average investor makes? Is it selling too soon, or not going with the right group? Or what do you think the average investor's biggest mistake is?
I think the hardest part is giving money to people who don't know what they're doing. I mean, I'm always amazed at that. I'll always meet with people I went to high school with or college, and I'll ask them what they're doing with their money, and they'll tell me, I'm like, oh my God, I would never do that. Like, put it into a fund or do this.
What about your basketball players? I mean, basketball players aren't famous for being great investors, I don't think, but maybe yours are good.
No, it's the same thing. I mean, you would be shocked. It's exactly what you said. So I spent a lot of time with them explaining where they should invest. Giannis had a great line. He was at our house one day, and we were talking about investing. And he said, he goes, where do you keep your money? I said, well, my money's at JP Morgan. I go, where do you keep yours? He goes, 50 different banks. I was like, what do you mean 50 banks? He goes, 50 banks. Because I do it up to the insured amount. And so I got to make sure my money's insured. And part of that is because he's from Greece. He was worried about banks going under. I'm like, Giannis, you can't be like having accounts at 50 different banks. Like, let me tell you something. If JP Morgan goes under, your little dinky banks are going to go under too. Like, let me explain what you should buy. You should buy U.S. Treasuries. You should buy this. And it actually was fascinating. Just you've got to spend time with them for them to understand all this.
Now, if somebody says, I want to be the next Mark Lasry, I want to be a great distressed debt investor and own an NBA championship team. I don't know whether they want to do the former or the latter, more probably the latter, but let's suppose they want to be a distressed debt investor. What do you advise people to do to get trained to be an investor? Is it just do well in school, be good with numbers, be willing to litigate? What is it that you need to do?
I think it's a mixture of everything. I think you have to do really well in school. I think that's number one. I think you have to be really good at numbers. And then I think you need training. And, whether that's going to work at a firm like yours or Goldman or Morgan Stanley, have like 2 to 3 years where you're in a program. And then, I think we like to hire people after they've had some sort of training for 2 to 4 years.
And the greatest pleasure of your life today is your grandchildren, your children?
It's my children. I would tell you my children, my grandchildren. I get so much joy from that.
And you think you can repeat as NBA champion?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.